Today, we're diving into one of the most pivotal stories in all of history, the trial and crucifixion of Jesus. And we're going to break it down with some guidance from the analysis of Dr. David Turner by looking at it through the eyes of three men whose lives collided on one single world-changing night. Everything happens in just a matter of hours. In one night, you have a prophet, a fisherman, and a politician all set on a collision course. And the choices they make, their motivations, their failures, well, they're going to echo for the next 2,000 years. At its heart, this is a story of incredible contrasts. You have Jesus, a king with a kingdom that nobody really understands. Then there's Peter, his most loyal disciple, whose loyalty turns out to be shockingly fragile. And finally, you have Pontius Pilate, a Roman governor with all the power in the world, but as we'll see, no real moral center to guide him. Okay, so our story kicks off in a garden, late at night. And right out of the gate, the Gospel of John throws this powerful contrast right in our faces, the difference between Jesus and his most passionate follower, Peter. Their reactions to the coming arrest are just night and day. Dr. Turner calls this a dual plot. On the one hand, you've got Jesus, who is completely in control. When the guards show up, he doesn't run. He steps right toward them and says, "I am he," just knowingly walking right into his destiny. But on the other hand, you've got Peter, who totally panics, acts out of pure fear, and starts swinging a sword. And that one moment kicks off his own parallel story, a story of him spiraling from bravado into total denial. So while Jesus is inside, facing his accusers with this incredible clarity, Peter's just hanging out in the courtyard. The pressure on him is way, way lower. And still, just like Jesus said would happen, his courage just evaporates. 3 different times people ask him if he knows Jesus. And 3 times he says no. That rooster crowing, it's not just a sound. It's the alarm bell going off on Peter's greatest failure. Okay, so while Peter's personal drama is happening outside, the main event shifts inside to the Roman governor's palace. And here, a totally different kind of confrontation is about to go down. It's this tense duel between raw, worldly power and a divine kind of truth, between Jesus and Pontius Pilate. Pilate does not mess around. He couldn't care less about theology. He cares about power and politics. Is this man a threat to Rome? Is he trying to stir up a rebellion? So he cuts right to the chase with a question that is absolutely loaded. Are you the king of the Jews? And what Jesus does here is just brilliant. He completely sidesteps the political trap and just redefines the whole conversation. He's basically saying, yeah, I'm a king, but not in any way you would understand. My kingdom isn't built on armies and land. It's built on truth. You can just feel the frustration coming from Pilate here. For him, a Roman official stuck in this backwater province, this is just another messy local squabble he has to clean up. He just snaps, "Am I a Jew?" Which is his way of saying, this is your mess, not mine. Your own leaders handed you over. Just tell me what you did so I can get this over with. And this is the moment that tells you everything you need to know about Pontius Pilate. When Jesus bases his entire mission on the concept of truth, Pilate just dismisses it with this cynical question. Now, he's not actually asking. It's a shrug. It shows you this is a man who believes in nothing except power and whatever is convenient for him. He has no moral anchor. And yet, for all his cynicism, Pilate knows that Jesus is innocent. In fact, 3 separate times during this whole ordeal, he goes out and tells the crowd, "I find no basis for a charge against this man." But here's the kicker. He never has the courage to act on his own judgment. Now, it's really important to remember that Pontius Pilate wasn't just some character made up for a story. Oh no, he was a very real person with very real power in Judea, and we actually have the archaeological proof. So get this, back in 1961, archaeologists digging in Caesarea found this stone block, and carved right into it is a Latin inscription that clearly names Pontius Pilatus, that's Pilate, as the prefect of Judea. This is a real, tangible object that grounds this entire story in the hard facts of Roman history. So Pilate's indecisiveness, his desire to just keep things quiet without taking a real moral stand, leads him to make a fatal political calculation. And what follows is the crucifixion, a whole spectacle of mockery, of irony, and, according to the Gospel of John, a fulfilled prophecy. The whole thing turns when the religious leaders switch their tactics. They drop their religious charges and go straight for political blackmail. That line, "You are no friend of Caesar," is a direct threat to Pilate's career. And in that moment, he has a choice, his conscience or his job. He chooses his job. And then, in this moment of just staggering irony, the Jewish leaders, who hate Roman rule, shout, "We have no king but Caesar." But even as he condemns Jesus, Pilate gets in one last bitter shot at the leaders who cornered him. He insists on putting this sign on the cross, and he has it written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek so that absolutely everyone can read it. The leaders hate it, they want it changed, but Pilate refuses. And in his attempt to mock them, he accidentally broadcast a core belief of Christianity to the entire world. Talk about irony. Now, the Gospel of John is being very deliberate here. The author points out all these little details, the soldier's gambling for his clothes, his legs not being broken, because he wants to make it clear that these aren't just random acts of cruelty. To him, these are all direct fulfillments of ancient scriptures, proving that this was all part of a much larger divine plan. And with his last breath, Jesus cries out, but this isn't a cry of defeat, it's a shout of victory. According to Dr. Turner's analysis, it means the mission is accomplished. It's a declaration that he has done exactly what he came to do. So, after this incredible collision of fates, what are we left with? Well, we have 3 men, and the legacies they leave behind couldn't possibly be more different from each other. Let's just break down the final verdict. You have Jesus, motivated by obedience and love, whose legacy is an active surrender to a divine plan. Then there's Peter, motivated by fear and a very flawed loyalty. He fails, spectacularly, but his story is a cautionary tale, a lesson about the need for pruning before you can truly grow. And then you have Pilate, driven only by political convenience. He's a man, as Dr. Turner says, with no moral compass because he was willing to trade an innocent life just to make a problem go away. You know, it's easy to forget just how crazy this story would have sounded to people back then. I mean, look at this. This is a real piece of graffiti from ancient Rome. It's making fun of a Christian named Alexamenos for worshiping a crucified man with the head of a donkey. This shows you exactly how the Roman world saw this new religion. It wasn't just different, it was absurd, shameful, and something to be ridiculed. And all of that brings us to the final thought. See, the story of Pilate isn't just about ancient history. It's like a mirror held up to all of us. It forces us to ask, what happens when our deepest beliefs run up against political pressure, or even just our own personal comfort? What are our non-negotiables? And unlike Pilate, are we willing to stand by them, even when it costs us something?